What you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
Welcome back to America Trends. I'm Larry Rifkin along with John Krofsick, and we're here working like in Dobie Gillis when Maynard G. Krebs said, work! Remember how he was averse to work? Boy, he should come back because this is an exciting
He'd be a
time.
Star.
Yeah, not to enjoy working. This is the era to do it.
This isn't really work we do, though. This is, as Mark Twain said.
Oh, now you're quoting Twain. Yes. Go on.
What did he say?
What did he say, John?
He said, find something you love to do and you'll never go to work in your life. Something
Right.
like that.
I don't think that was a direct quote.
No.
I think that was paraphrasing.
I kind of paraphrased.
Well, did you meet him because he used to live in Hartford? Maybe you met him because we're just about 30 miles from Hartford. Well, we have Darrell West joining us today. He's written a book called The Future of Work.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to reckon with these darn robots and AI and automation.
Doesn't sound too good.
Well, let me ask you, John, do you think that this is going to be helpful, that we're going to have so many of these modern conveniences that are going to be able to take over some of the drudgery of what we've been doing over the years?
You know what? I even refuse to go to self-checkouts in the store because it's ridiculous. I always have trouble. I'd rather deal with a human.
I thought you didn't go because you thought that meant a self-examination, that you had to look at your soul and your being.
Well, it could be, too.
When you were taking out all those Entenmann's cakes.
They scanned me.
They scan you. Well, artificial intelligence, is it really going to disrupt the future of work? And are we ready for this? We pose a lot of questions to Darrell in this podcast. Are there going to be fewer jobs in the future? What do we do about the growth of all of this? Because we're really curious about this, John. We've heard many people say, oh, it's not going to have that much impact. It's going to be like the changeover from agrarian to industrial. Others saying, no, it's going to be a lot more dramatic and impactful than that. And there are going to be a lot of people who really just have nothing to do. So I don't know what to believe because we're not quite there yet, though we are seeing the edges of that. Have you been in a McDonald's lately?
No, I kind of refuse to go on those too.
All right. Well, I have. Not a lot, but I have. And I'll tell you, they've redone their stores. And you can go and talk to a human if you like,
okay.
Or you can go up to a kiosk and you can make your order there. I mean, there's different ways of doing it.
Yeah,
and I think you're going to see that more and more.
I was in some restaurant. I forget now which one, but they got the gimmick at the table there, and you do it all, and then they just bring it over to you. And yeah, it's kind of spooky, I think.
Well, that means the wait service really is unnecessary.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of things that are going to be displaced. We know that. But that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be new jobs, better jobs, if we know how to correct some of the things that are going wrong with these robots. That's got to be a future. There's got to be a future in different, really sophisticated realms. What I worry about, John, is the average person who doesn't have that sophistication or that skill level.
Well, me too. I think we already we have a problem of people. I mean, we're cranking out these kids from colleges and stuff for jobs, and there's nothing. I mean, it's just, especially in the state we're in, I think it's not good. It's just not good.
A lot of these kids are getting a good holistic education. It doesn't mean that it's directly applicable to jobs that are emerging out of this. Well, Darrell West believes, and let me just quote from the book, that older positions will be eliminated faster than new ones are created.
Yeah.
And that will leave workers with few skills unable to find jobs. Let's talk to him, John. Let's get his perspective. He's from the Brookings Institution, very smart guy. And let's get one man's take on the future of work. On the line with us is Darrell West. He is the director of the Center for Technology Innovation at the Brookings Institution. And it's a fascinating book that you've written, and the book is called The Future of Work: Robots, AI, and Automation. Darrell, we have tackled this topic in the past, and there are some who believe that AI is going to be the best thing that ever happened to us and for us. Your book has kind of a mixed bag about the implications of where we are headed. And would you like to tell us what your general philosophy is about this topic?
I mean, I think when you look at technology innovation in general, in terms of artificial intelligence, robots, facial recognition, it's a good news, bad news scenario. The good news is these technologies bring a lot of convenience to our lives. They are taking on the routine and sometimes dirty tasks that humans don't want to do. But the thing we have to worry about is just what is going to be the impact on the workforce. Are people going to be displaced and lose jobs? And how do we handle this transition period as the new technologies start to come online?
Before we get into actually the future of work, and I'm not doing this to get ratings and to be titillating, but there was a piece in your book or a segment dealing with sex toys and the way they're being robotized and these dolls and everything. And I've got to admit, until I read the way you described it all, I couldn't understand it at all. It made no sense to me that this was even possible or that somebody could actually get pleasure or value from this. But it was really revealing in terms of the way automation is moving. And again, not to get into graphic detail, but, explain to us what that tells us about where we're headed if, in fact, people are going to actually, literally have relationships with sex robots.
I mean, what it tells us is that technology is really going to transform virtually every area. And we certainly know robots are being used in factories. There are home cleaning robots that can sweep the floor. And so we shouldn't be surprised that we're also seeing robots start to take off in the sex industry. It's a small but very distinctive niche. Oftentimes, that is a sector that has driven a lot of innovation when you look historically at this. So there now are manufacturers who are developing sex robots. You can choose the personality you want, the features, the look, like all the things that people are interested in, and basically the prices are coming down, so this is becoming a consumer item.
Can anybody invest any emotional value in a relationship, which even if it's conjugal and sexual, there's an emotional component that is very human. But how does that get transcribed to artificial intelligence and a sex robot? I just can't quite understand that.
Well, think about how our relationship with our phones have changed. Like I grew up with rotary dial phones that were very mechanical. Now I have a smartphone, and I feel like sometimes I'm living my life on the phone because you communicate, you surf the internet, you communicate with other people. So, that old mechanical object has taken on a lot of new functions, and we're seeing exactly the same thing in every other area as well. And so, people obviously vary quite a bit in terms of what they're looking for in the pleasure area. And clearly, many people would not be interested in a sex robot, but it is a niche, and the companies that are working in this area claim that there's very strong demand.
When we look at the future of work, as your book points out and your title suggests, there are some who think, well, a lot of the people looking at the future, people like you, Darrell West, you're overestimating the needs for humans to fix these machines, to create new machines, to develop applications for new technology. And so it's not going to be a whole lot worse than the agrarian revolution or the industrial revolution. But you think it's going to be many times more dramatic, the impact, than that.
I think it is going to be dramatic because we're not just talking about new technologies that are coming along, things like autonomous vehicles. Finance is adopting a lot of AI applications. I've been in restaurants now where you walk in and they hand you a tablet and you order from the tablet as opposed to dealing with a waiter or waitress. But in addition to the technology, we're also seeing a major change in business models. The emergence of the sharing economy, the gig economy, which basically means part-time jobs without benefits. So when you think about the possible impact on the workforce, you have to think about not just what's happening in the technology area and the new products and services that are coming online, but the way in which employment is changing. And that's where the real revolution is going to take place. It's the combination of the technology and the shifts in the business models.
And we're already seeing a lot of what you're talking about, where you have jobs without benefits, you have an external supply chain, you have a lot of people who now define themselves as independent contractors, and yet you have a society that ties a lot of your value and a lot of your benefits to your job. That's not the case in all societies, but clearly in the American culture it is.
It is, and that is going to be a real challenge for the United States going forward, because most of our benefits, health care and retirement benefits and disability benefits, are tied to having full-time jobs. And so if employers start to shift towards temporary workers or independent contractors or short-term gigs, the question is, how are those people going to get that benefits? Sometimes I think people focus too much on the job part, and they need to focus on the benefit implications of some of the changes that we're seeing, and also the income differentials that are emerging, because sometimes people now have to work 2 or 3 jobs in order to kind of pull together a full-time job, and so that's a major change as well.
And we'll get into some of the policy recommendations that you make in this regard. But I do want to ask you, already we're starting to see signs of a different type of gig economy, or people who are not given that job that's going to be theirs for the next 25 years. Things are changing so rapidly. The relationship between workers and employers has changed pretty dramatically. There's been a de-unionization of America. And yet at the same time, I don't think we've seen the true growth of AI, robotics, and automation to where it's going to be going in the next 10, 15, 20 years. So imagine that for us, multiplied by all of the convulsions that we've already seen.
I mean, we still are in the early phases of the technology revolution. But, for example, autonomous cars, we're not talking about something that's 5 and 10 years down the road. Like we're already seeing the road testing that is going on. Many of the auto manufacturers are planning to roll these vehicles out for real either in 2019 or 2020. So literally the next 1 to 2 years, we're going to be seeing these kind of vehicles on the road. In the retail sector, there's stores that are experimenting with self-checkout lines, stores without clerks, curbside pickup of online orders. So there's clearly going to be a lot of transformation that takes place there as well. So what I tell people based on my book is I think where people are going to be shocked is just how quickly a lot of these changes unfold. For example, when smartphones came in, in the early days, there were a few people using it, but then as people got good results, we almost instantly ended up in a situation where 2/3 or more of Americans had smartphones. And this is the way technology takes off. It kind of starts slow, but then once it crosses a certain threshold and people feel comfortable with it, it just takes off, and many people adopt that new technology.
How many dislocations can people take? When I look at 2008, 2009, and a lot of construction and manufacturing jobs were wiped out during the recession, and outsourcing and the like, a lot of people went into driving. A lot of men, it's the leading occupation in many states. So there they were. They moved from manufacturing to driving an 18-wheeler across the country, whatever it may be, or driving for Uber, and now they're going to be displaced again. I mean, how capable is this society of regenerating new jobs and new talents?
Well, that is going to be a big challenge, particularly in that area, because right now the United States has 2.5 million truck drivers. Most of them are individuals with just a high school education, so their ability to qualify for new jobs is going to be limited. There are 300,000 taxi drivers, 400,000 Uber drivers, and over 300,000 Lyft drivers. So when you start to imagine just the impact of autonomous vehicles on truck driving, taxi driving, and the ride-sharing services, there are 3.5 million Americans who are working in those fields. So the potential for disruption is quite substantial. And as you point out, many of the people who are doing those jobs got disrupted 10 years ago, so they already had to make one career shift. They now may need to make another one. And it's the entry-level jobs that are being disrupted right now. And if we end up losing a lot of those, the people who are doing those types of positions are going to have a lot of difficulties. There certainly are going to be new jobs that are created, data analytics, computer design, software coding, and so on. But many of the people who are going to be displaced are not going to have the skills for those new jobs.
There is this debate that is going on among scholars about replacement versus augmentation. Don't worry, not all the jobs are going to be automated. There is a cost to doing that, and maybe people find that they don't want to interact with the machines. I mean, what's your take on this? Do you think that there'll be a point where we'll go back and people will want to reinvest in their companies in humans, or will we inexorably move toward artificial intelligence and machine doing?
Well, in the short run, I agree that augmentation rather than replacement is the most likely scenario. So, for example, there was a McKinsey study that found that only about 30% of the activities, but in 60% of the jobs, can be automated right now. And so when you think about what that means in terms of replacement, like if a computer can only do about 30% of your job, your employer is probably going to keep you in that position. But as that percentage starts to rise to 50, 60, and 70%, at that point, the employer is going to consider replacing you. So, it may not be a risk that we're facing right away. It may not be in the next 2 to 3 years, but certainly on a 5 to 10 year time horizon, there's a very real risk that we're going to move beyond augmentation to replacement.
When we do look at what computers are able to do today and what our programming capabilities are, a lot of people think that AI is only about repetitive tasks. So somebody who's restocking a shelf or whatever it may be. But we are told from other scholars that we've talked to, and I think you agree with this, that in fact there are many different tasks. Can you almost not imagine a task today done by a human that down the line with better science and algorithms and techniques couldn't be adapted to a machine?
AI is moving way beyond repetitive tasks, and the same is true in terms of robotics. So, for example, in the finance area, half of stock market trades today are fully automated, meaning machines are kind of finding those small discrepancies in valuation and independently trading on that information. People in the finance area say they expect AI systems to become even more prevalent in the very near future. So there clearly are going to be lots of jobs lost in the finance sector. In the healthcare area, we're finding that AI can be trained to read X-rays and CAT scans. It's just a matter of showing the software enough images and basically distinguishing these are the images that have normal readings versus the images that have abnormal readings. And if you show them enough CAT scans, they will end up being able to accurately diagnose potential problems. So, these are examples of where AI already is being used and already is achieving very good results. But we're going to see the same thing in a lot of other areas as well.
You talk about how 5G will enable an internet of medical things. And I'm wondering if we get great value, because you're suggesting, I believe, that the cost of healthcare with remote medicine and some of these new technologies can go down dramatically, perhaps by 30%. So is there some trade-off? May lose my job just like trade did, but I'm getting a cheaper item from China, or now I'm getting a cheaper healthcare package because of all of this.
I mean, there certainly should be a lot of cost savings from technology, and as the systems get better and better, hopefully they can help us save costs in the medical area. That certainly has been a huge problem. We're going to see people use remote monitoring devices, so they can basically stay in their home. They will have sensors and devices that monitor their critical and vital signs, and will electronically transmit that to their physician. So, they don't have to go to a doctor's office, or they don't have to go to a hospital. The physician will be able to track what is going on with those individuals. So things like that should end up saving a lot of money. But we have to figure out a way, if there's going to be a negative impact on the workforce, how people are going to earn a living, how they're going to get benefits, even if we end up in a situation where there are cheaper products and more efficient services that are being provided.
Well, when you think about it, we used to integrate our lives much more where we lived on a farm and we all got the needs that we had and sustained ourselves, and we didn't look to the outside for much of what we needed to live as a family. Today, obviously, it's very different. We outsource a lot of that which we need to experts. Lots of things in our home we can't repair, or our car we can't repair. So now we're going to get back a lot of our lives. And you write that the new technologies of various periods have enabled people to be very productive while working just a few hours. Society does not need a large number of employees, so individuals can devote most of their waking hours to education, personal interest, volunteering, and community betterment. Sounds like somebody who's retired. And so if we're retiring much of the workforce, are we going to get used to that? And what role is the government going to have to play to make certain we can all survive?
Well, this is a possible positive scenario, let's say 20 or 30 years from now. Let's imagine a situation where the technology has improved, technical products do a lot of the jobs that we used to do, that could enable humans to work fewer hours, still earn a living, and have more leisure time. People have hobbies, art, music, culture. They may be having sports interests they want to pursue. There may be volunteer or educational activities in which they're interested. People in the future may end up with a much better work-life balance than what members of the older generation had. And so in this situation, we need to make policy changes that basically help people navigate this transition and make sure that the system still works effectively and people can earn a living even if they're working fewer hours.
You quote the McKinsey analysis that you referred to earlier of 750 jobs concluded that, quote, 45% of paid activities could be automated using currently demonstrated technologies, and 60% of occupations could have 30% or more of their process automated. And you think this is going to happen in a relatively short period of time. There are some who look at this as being far into the future, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You think this might be coming much sooner to a job near us?
I think it is going to come much sooner. I mean, I spend a lot of time talking with people about technology, and a lot of people still envision technology as a pretty futuristic thing that, 20 and 30 years from now, there are going to be big changes. And I think what they don't realize is the billions of dollars that already are being invested in digital products and digital services, and how the robots are getting better, the AI systems are getting better. Soon we're going to have 5G networks, which are faster and more efficient. All these things are coming together right now, and that's what's going to produce a change that happens faster than many people realize.
Men usually define themselves, at least in our culture, by virtue of their work. You know, the first question when you meet somebody, so what do you do? What kind of psychological impact is this change going to have?
Well, in the current climate, it could have a negative ramifications for people because, as you point out, many of us define both our personal and our professional identities in terms of the job. And if either fewer people are needed for work, or if all of us are working fewer hours than what we currently do now, that's going to be a major transition. But the positive sign is if we redefine work to include volunteer activities, caretaking, people staying home to take care of little kids or taking care of aging relatives, we know that that's socially beneficial. That could be a way for people to kind of redefine the nature of work, still contribute a lot to society, and get rewarded for engaging in these socially beneficial things. So it's certainly going to be a transition period. It's going to require a lot of adjustment in how we think about work, but there are positive scenarios where people could end up in a much better situation than we are right now.
Yes, you point out, for much of recorded history, jobs were not the be-all, end-all of human existence. People understood identity as more closely linked to family, ethnic group, religion, neighborhood, or tribe. But I think, again, we've outsourced a lot of that to the work environment. And I think for at least the generation that I'm in, which is the baby boom generation, and of course most of us are passing through that work phase now, we're having to reconnect and redefine ourselves in this new era as we are aging out of the workforce. And so it can be difficult. I can tell that already from a lot of my friends.
Definitely. It's going to be an adjustment, but people are going to have to learn to become more agile in how we think about this. So, for example, when he was speaking about evolution, Charles Darwin had this famous quote that survival is not based on being the strongest or even the most intelligent, but the most adaptable. And I think that logic applies very much to the digital world as well. We know that the pace of change is accelerating. There are going to be lots of surprises in politics and economics and in society as a whole. People are going to have to become more agile to kind of go with the flow, make changes as different things become apparent, and just become more adaptable and more agile in the process.
The book is called The Future of Work, Robots, AI, and Automation. Darrell West from the Brookings Institution is with us. And you say that the period ahead, the future, doesn't have to be utopia or dystopia. But you say if this transition is handled well, it could usher in a utopian period of widespread peace, prosperity, and leisure time. Do you see any policymakers grabbing a hold of this? Some of the policies that you talk about are the changes as it relates to family leave or really helping to support families with their various needs, health care. I mean, do you really see anybody looking to the future, particularly if the future is about to descend on us much more quickly than we can imagine?
Well, this is the reason I wrote the book, because my fear is I don't think we're really having sufficient public discussions about this. Our political leaders are engaging in fear-mongering and not really kind of helping us deal with the transition to the digital world that is about to take place. I argue in the book that we can actually end up in utopia if we develop policies that help people in this transition period. And I like to use the comparison of 100 years ago, America shifted from an agrarian to an industrial economy. It was very chaotic. It was very difficult. There was violence. It took several decades to work through this, but we developed Social Security, unemployment insurance. We broke up the monopolies. We added an income tax to the Constitution. We expanded the electorate. Women got the right to vote. I mean, there were a lot of both economic and political changes. And at the end of that period, America ended up in great shape. And we won a major war and became a global leader after World War II. We're kind of at the stage now where we need equally fundamental reforms. We need economic changes as well as political changes But the big difference compared to 100 years ago is just the poor governance that we have right now. And if there's anything that makes me pessimistic, it's not kind of figuring out how we deal with technology or how we deal with changing business models. It's the poor governance. I worry that we're not going to be in position to make the policy changes that are needed, and that could convert what could be a utopia into a dystopia.
Do you think we're seeing some early facets of that in the fissures in our society and the convulsive politics when we're going from a liberal president to a conservative and back to a liberal, and we're throwing out Congresses, and nothing seems to be satisfying us in terms of the response to the conditions on the ground?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing I worry the most about is we may be entering a period of what I call Trumpism on steroids, meaning that Trump did a very good job identifying the economic anxiety and developing messages to play to that. But if anything, he actually may have underestimated the nature of the problem, because his diagnosis of our economic maladies was a loss of manufacturing jobs and bad trade deals. But the problem is actually much bigger than that. You know, it's automation, it's technology innovation, and it's the changes in the business models. And so, if anything, if we don't come up with good policies, the economic anxiety, as all of these changes start to kick in, has the potential to become much more substantial. So we may be in for a period of populist politics, where American politics basically alternates between right-wing populism, which is what we have now, and left-wing populism. But the populism is the dominant characteristic in the years going forward.
You're suggesting a couple of things in closing, but one is a solidarity tax. What is that?
I argue that in this transition period where there's going to be a lot of economic disruption, we're going to need a lot more emphasis on retraining workers, like the truck drivers who may end up losing jobs and have to be retrained, the retail clerks, the restaurant workers, people in factories who might be displaced by robots. So it's going to cost money. And so just as 100 years ago, we added an income tax basically as a new tax to help finance some of the new government programs that were needed there, that we're in a similar situation today. And so I suggest we need a solidarity tax, also known as a wealth tax. It's a way to deal with the increase in inequality that we're seeing, but it also will help provide the revenues that we're going to need to finance better education, more worker retraining, and helping workers during this transition period when people might be losing jobs.
Darrell West, I thank you for being with us today. I think it's been a really interesting conversation. The Future of Work, Robots, AI, and Automation, that's the book, and he's from the Brookings Institution. Darrell, thanks again for being with us on America Trends.
Thank you very much.